welcome back to a Different World podcast. Happy New Year. Happy 2019.
Happy New Year.
I'm excited to be back.
Likewise.
This is a Different World podcast where we like to thrive on having disruptive conversations about anything from politics to religion to sex to pop culture to everything else in between. And we thrive on also educating and entertaining as well at the same time. And I'm your host, Corey Kareem, along next side too.
Angelina Williams.
And we have Kern here in spirit. You can't see him, but you can probably feel him. And today is actually episode 6, and we're actually doing a series, and we're calling it Hidden Figures. So this is our way of paying homage to Black History Month. And so instead of looking back at historical figures, we decided it would be pretty cool if we focused on the present and the future by honoring Black Canadians that are, blazing in their careers where there's not too many Black faces. So without further ado, I actually have someone here that's very special to me, a childhood friend, Dr. Lara Gotha. So Dr. Lara Gotha, I'm going to give you a little round of applause here for coming on Different World Podcast. So tell us a little bit about yourself, like your career and, what you do, and let everybody know.
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Lara Gotha. I am an obstetrician and gynecologist working in Toronto, and I'm subspecializing in maternal fetal medicine, so high-risk pregnancies, either mom or baby being very sick, needing extra care during the pregnancy itself.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so Dr. Gotha, I remember when you were like, side note, I'm gonna tell him some little side stuff now.
He's going into it.
I remember in the beginning, you were so uncomfortable with that title. You're like, oh, I'd send you a text. You're like, oh, don't call me that. Don't call me that. I'm like, girl, you earned it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that, because I saw your IG handle or something, and it said doctor on it. I'm like, I'm glad that you kind of like, you owned it.
Yeah.
You paid the dues. So
that was a recent change.
Yeah.
It took a long time to let people know that I was a doctor. I'd say I work in healthcare, or, I work in the hospital, but I would never actually say I'm a doctor. So
yeah.
Why is that?
I think for me, it just came from, I didn't want to feel like I was bragging. Even though I went through the school and I earned the degree or the degrees, to me, it felt like if you kind of put that out there, just for my personal self, it felt like I was bragging a little bit. And I kind of a bit of imposter syndrome.
It's because I guess again, we're talking about hidden figures, but it was because like you were one of few or one of the only. So that kind of isolation.
Yeah, I think it wasn't so much that I was one of few, but more so that I just didn't want to intimidate people. Like the kind of acceptance in society sometimes isn't always as high when you just kind of throw out there, I'm a doctor, and people are expecting other things from you. But all of that has changed. I've accepted it.
Well, congrats again. Super proud of you.
Sure.
So my first question is, what was that defining moment where you said, aha, this is what I want to be, this is what I want to do? Talk to us about that moment.
Yeah. So it wasn't so much a moment of, aha, I want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
I think for me, the more important one was the, aha, I can be a doctor. So... and that to me was more important because my thoughts changed along my entire education of what I wanted to do, physiotherapy, medicine.
Right.
But when I was about 10 or so, I was sitting in my pediatrician's office with my mom and just sitting kind of back, because when you're a kid, you don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
And just watching her talk to my mom, she, Dr. Anna Jarvis, she was a Jamaican lady, and I just kind of was watching her and her interaction, and I said, she looks how I could look when I grow up. I could do this.
Got it.
And so before then, I had never thought of medicine as a thing. But after that, I said, oh, I could do this. I could be a doctor like her.
Right.
I could do, something similar.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was my aha moment. It was more that it kind of opened that door for me.
I think that's pretty amazing because we always talk about the importance of representation, and your story is completely in line with that. The idea of no, I want to be versus I can be. I can do this thing because I'm seeing myself reflected in people in this area. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really great. My next question for you is, in moments of difficulty and trying times, is there any like public figure you look for towards inspiration? Is there someone that you channel? Because I remember growing up, you was like the Jada, like you channel your inner Jada Pinkett, like that was like your thing. I don't know, that's changed now. You got a white coat, you know what I mean? But yeah, so who's your source of inspiration during those moments?
I think it's going to sound really cliche, but it's Oprah.
Okay.
But pre-syndication Oprah. Like,
got it.
Way back. And I have this video clip that I kind of go back to and I'll always watch. And it's her in an interview before she went national.
Okay.
Before her show started. And a man is interviewing her and he says, so your show is about to start.
Yeah.
And she says, it'll do well. Without even a question being asked.
Wow.
And he said, well, what if it doesn't?
Yeah.
And she said, I'll still do well.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that drive to know that no matter what, as long as I keep going, as long as I believe myself, if things don't work out on one path and I keep going, then that's my motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So pre-syndication Oprah is my spirit animal.
There you go. I'm not mad at Oprah, man. I was one of the biggest things I love about Oprah is when I get the chance to speak with people. I was like, I call it the Oprah Winfrey effect. He's like, you gotta play the game till you can like understand the game until you can own the game. Mm-hmm. Because if you see the course of her career where she was on some small channel station in some small town to the part where she got her own show until she had enough money and equity to become a producer of her own show to the fact now that she owns her own network. So I think it's a really important lesson that transition she went through. Mm-hmm. But that's awesome. Do you still channel Jada by any chance? Just throwing that out there?
Yes. I don't even know what that means, but
okay.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Okay, good.
She's a powerhouse in her own right, so I would take it.
Got it.
So one of the things that I loved that you mentioned was going to the pediatrician as a child, and you are blessed to have a pediatrician that reflected you and your culture and where you come from, and being able to say, hey, I can be a doctor as well. Few people have those experiences where their healthcare provider is part of their community. I want to talk about the impact that has on women, especially when it comes to obstetrics. Mm-hmm. So there's tons of studies that talk about maternal mortality with respects to women's, especially women of color. So Black women, First Nations women, really being ignored in terms of their care or some of their concerns after giving birth. What are your thoughts about you being in this field and how more representation can potentially impact and improve those statistics?
Yeah. So I think visual representation of people of color in medicine has a huge impact on community health for the various communities that we treat, partly because it helps us, we care about all our patients, but it helps us take that extra special interest to say, these people that are similar to me are suffering from X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. What is different about this population? What determinants of their health are different that we need to maybe look into, screen for, or treat and manage differently to help them? Mm-hmm. And I know in some of the studies that you're referencing, they also looked at the difference between women of different race and how they approach their problems, their symptoms, when they take their symptoms to the doctor. Mm-hmm. And there was one study that looked at women's symptoms and saying, who do you speak to about your symptoms? Mm. And Black women on the survey said friends and family. Right. So they may not feel that their doctors represent them. Right. And may not understand culturally whether it's, I don't, accept these certain medications, so I don't want to go to my doctor because those are the medications they're going to push on me. Right. And so if they feel that maybe there's more of a sense of somebody from my community, somebody from my background, somebody that understands where I'm from, right, or what I think, right, that they may be more willing to present to the doctor earlier.
So how much do you think bias really plays in how professionals in your industry treat their patients? Do you think that it really does play a role in care?
I think historically it played a negative role. Mm-hmm. And so certain people of color, people from certain backgrounds were kind of brushed under the rug in terms of their symptoms, saying, oh, this is just a group that has, a higher complaining level of symptoms. Mm-hmm. Whereas now I think the bias has shifted to a more beneficial role in saying, we know that these women have higher incidence of, maternal mortality, as you say, and other outcomes, obstetrical outcomes, maybe we should be looking at them differently, managing them differently.
Right.
And so in that sense, I think that bias has made a positive shift and is more of a positive bias now than it wasn't before.
How do you think that women, or just people in general, can be advocates for themselves when they are going into a facility, whether it be like, hey, I'm feeling this pain, and sometimes you don't want to kind of complain about pain or whatever, but how can we be better advocates for ourselves or even for our loved ones? Like, you maybe have an elder parent or grandparent that you care for. How can we fight for them?
I think the most important thing is to be open and to ask the questions and say, listen, I came to you, I have this pain, and I'm concerned about it because I read, or my friend had this, or my sister had this. And not just taking everything that is given to you at face value. So if a doctor says, oh, well, that's this. Yes, they're this physician, and yes, they have had training, but they don't feel what you feel.
Right.
And you can delve further and say, okay, I understand that you've given me this, but it's not quite fitting. Yeah. And feel free to have an open dialogue with the physicians or the care
We're a more informed population.
Sure.
And I'm going to tell you about a personal experience I've had, and going into the doctor's office and saying, hey, I think it's X. Oh, did you WebMD that, or did you Google that? And this very kind of condescending tone, because sometimes you feel that you do have to take your healthcare in your own hands, even though we live in Canada and it's for all intents and purposes free, right? So again, it's difficult sometimes to even fight for yourself when someone's being a little bit, you know.
And I think sometimes it's beating them to the punch and saying, listen, I have this symptom. Yes, I Googled it. Dr. Google tells me it's this. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm concerned. And if you frame it that way, they can say, well, yes, certain symptoms align with this. However, we can do tests, or based off of the rest of your history, it may be something else.
Can you ask for tests from your doctor?
You can always ask. They may have the discussion with you. There may be steps before the test that may be more reasonable.
Right.
And that would kind of defer tests that are unnecessary.
Right.
So you can always ask, though, and say, do you think this test would be reasonable for my thyroid, my blood level, whatever?
Right.
There's no harm in asking, because the worst they're going to say is no, or let's look at something else first and then come to that.
Right.
But you can always ask.
So I'm a big believer in like second and third opinions. Like I shop.
The forever skeptic.
I shop because you guys are not computers. You're not perfect.
Sure. Everyone
has a level of bias. I just have to, take that into consideration if I don't feel like my needs are being addressed accordingly. So my question is for you, do you feel there's a reason why there's not many Black faces, students in med school? Do you think it's more of a cultural mindset issue, or is it more of a systemic issue, or maybe it's a combination of both?
I think it is part a societal or cultural mindset, in the same way that I was lucky enough to have somebody that looked like me and I could say, I can do this. I think not everyone is as lucky to have that exposure.
Right.
Or if they are, they're not lucky enough to have it early on.
Right.
So it's something that has been long-standing, and yes, people of color in medicine is underrepresented relative to the general population, but it's also something that's recognized, and there are initiatives now that are kind of trying to change that. So when I was in medical school at the University of Toronto, we had the student mentorship or summer mentorship program.
Right.
And it was a program specifically geared for working with Black and First Nation students in Toronto and GTA to get them exposure to various professions. So medicine was one, but dentistry, law, and brought those kids in for the summer, provided them with mentors in the fields, in the various fields, to let them ask their questions, get experience, and see people that looked like them or that sounded like them, possibly, doing what they previously thought they couldn't do.
Right.
And that was a huge experience that I was part of for a few years.
And you found that to be very impactful, obviously.
Yes. So I did it for multiple years.
Yeah.
And it's a great program because you actually see some of those people then go through. I mean, I can only speak from the medicine perspective, but some of them come through medical school later on, and some of them are colleagues now that awesome. I mentored years before.
Do you feel like there's anything more that we can do to increase those numbers?
Yeah, I think it's about the education and the exposure.
Okay.
And so there's the Black Physicians Association of Ontario, which is just one of many associations, but they work with community organizations, community health centers, to increase exposure and to also help benefit programs that are trying to improve the Black community's health as well. And then U of T itself has a medical school application stream now. That because they recognize this underrepresentation, that there's one for Black students as well as one for Indigenous or First Nations students, that they can have the option to say, I identify as such, and I want to apply through that stream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. That's dope.
So it's getting better.
Getting better.
It's progress.
Better. It's
Hashtag
really
progress. Cool.
So, again, the series is called Hidden Figures, where we're really focusing on Black Canadians that are doing really well in their respective fields that we might not see a lot of representation. Do you consider yourself a hidden figure?
So thank you. I think it's a huge compliment to be put with the likes of in the categories as people like Catherine Johnson and Ms. Vaughn who worked with NASA, but I will never toot my own horn, so I wouldn't say that.
So let's toot it for her. Toot.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that I was a hidden figure for two reasons. I think the first is that the word hidden is a bit misconstrued. I think more it's undiscovered gem. Hidden implies that it's more of a purposeful act that I'm put in the back room and doing my good works from there. Undiscovered, I think we have a lot of work to do as Black physicians in Canada and throughout the world, to help better our communities and our healthcare for our communities. We're doing a lot of good work as it is, and I think that that's now coming to be recognized. And I think we have a lot of good work to do in the same way that Ms. Johnson and Ms. Vaughn had for NASA as well. But yeah, undiscovered gems.
Undiscovered gems.
I like that. Maybe we do a title change.
Yeah, right.
So here's my last question. It's not meant to throw you off, but to the up-and-coming young Black woman or man that wants to pursue a career in medicine, if you can offer them one piece of advice, what would that be?
Go out there and try it. Get the experience. Email people, call people, contact people, find a mentor. The mentor doesn't have to be in the profession that you want to be in, but somebody who has gone through something, who has had experiences and can guide you a little bit earlier, so that you don't kind of quit as soon as a first obstacle comes, because nothing is easy. And if you have somebody that can help you hurdle or get past those hurdles, I think it'll be a lot easier. So mentorship, get out there, get the experience, whether it's on your own or through a program like the summer mentorship program. That would be just go for it.
Perfect.
Just go for
it. That's it. Hashtag, just go for it. That's it. Well, Dr. Lara Gotha, thank you so much for coming through. I appreciate it. Coming through on the Different World podcast. And don't forget, guys, to check us out on YouTube at A Different World Podcast, or on Instagram, ADW_podcast. That's where you can find us. And that concludes episode 6. Peace and love. We're out.
Thank you.